The estate, valued at over 50 million, is to be inherited in full by Miss Aisha Johnson.
The morning they read the will, I wore the same black dress I had worn to serve Sikh Jean's tea for 11 years. I pressed the hem flat with both hands, the way he always asked me to. Calm, neat, present. I sat in a chair in the corner of his lawyer's office while men in expensive suits shuffled paper and cleared their throats and refused to make eye contact with me, and I thought, this is the last room I will ever sit in quietly. After this morning, quiet is over. The lawyer read the will in a voice designed to deliver difficult information without inflection. The house went to Jessica Smith. The investment accounts went to Jessica Smith. The private trust, all $47 million of it, went to Jessica Smith. The room did not explode. It went the kind of still that happens before explosions. That pressurized, disbelieving stillness where everyone is recalculating and no one has yet decided what to do about what they've just heard. She has been quiet for 11 years. She knows something that will break Sangchul's entire world. She is holding an envelope his father pressed into her hands 3 weeks before he died, with one instruction: give it to my son when he threatens you. Subscribe right now, because what Jessica Smith has been carrying inside that house for 11 years is not what anyone in this story expects. And the moment that envelope opens, nothing in the Yoon family will ever be the same again. I kept my hands folded in my lap. I did not look at Sangchul. I could feel him looking at me. And I thought, he doesn't know about the letter yet. He has no idea what his father left me inside that envelope. No idea what I know. No idea that the moment I hand it to him, everything he thinks he controls is going to fall apart. I had been waiting 11 years for this morning, but not for the reasons anyone in this room imagined. My name is Jessica Smith. I am 32 years old. I am the daughter of a man who drove a taxi in this city for 23 years and never once complained about it. I am the daughter of a woman who made the best fried plantains in any kitchen she ever stood in and laughed the way people laugh when they have decided, against all available evidence, to be joyful anyway. Both of them are gone now. My mother died of a stroke when I was 21. My father died when I was 22. He did not die of natural causes. But I am getting ahead of myself. For 11 years, I was the personal waitress in the private residence of a man named Sikh Yoon. Not a restaurant. Not a hotel. His home. A stone and glass house on a private road where I arrived at 6 in the morning and left at 7 in the evening, where I wore black every day and spoke only when spoken to and became, over those 11 years, the most invisible person in the most powerful household in this city. I learned early that invisibility in that house was not imposed on me. It was offered. It was a gift from a man who understood something that most powerful people never learn, that the person who brings your tea hears everything. And Sikh Yoon was meticulous about what he let me hear, and even more meticulous about what he chose to tell me directly. He told me things in 11 years that would have gotten both of us killed. The last thing he told me was this: Jessica, when I die, do not be afraid of Sangchul. Be afraid of nothing. I have handled everything from this side. You just need to handle one thing from yours. He pressed an envelope into my hands 3 weeks before he died. Give this to my son, he said. Only when he threatens you. Not before. 3 weeks later, he was gone. And now I am sitting in a lawyer's office wearing my black dress, holding an envelope in my bag, waiting for the moment Sangchul Yoon decides to threaten me. I won't have to wait long. I started working for Sikh Yoon in the autumn of my 21st year, 11 months after my mother died and 4 months after I had run out of reasons to pretend everything was fine. The job listing had been unusual. Personal household waitstaff for a private residence. Discretion required. Competitive wage. References preferred but not mandatory for the right candidate. I had no references. I had a 2-year hospitality certificate, a gift for stillness that years of grief had carved into me, and the kind of face that apparently communicated trustworthiness to the agency interviewer, because she sent me to the address without much hesitation. The house was enormous and understated in the way that very expensive things often are. No ostentation, no gates with crests, just thick stone walls and immaculate hedges, and a front door that opened before I knocked. The man who opened it was old. 70 then, though he carried it like 60. He was lean, white-haired, with black eyes that evaluated me without judgment, the way a chess player assesses a new piece, not assigning value yet, just noting position. "You're the agency's candidate," he said. "Yes, sir." "You're young." "Yes, sir." "Can you make tea without being asked?" I thought about my father's kitchen. His cup was always on the counter at 6:30 in the morning whether he'd asked for it or not. "Yes, sir." "Can you keep quiet when quiet is what a room needs?" I thought about sitting beside my mother in her last weeks, when words had been useless and presence was everything. "Yes, sir." He stepped back from the door. "Good. Start Monday." That was all. No formal interview. No reference checks. No contract until a week later when his lawyer produced one with terms generous enough to make me read it twice. I learned the rhythms of the house quickly. Seekjin woke at 5. He read until 7. He had green tea at 7:15, brewed with a precision that took me 2 weeks to master to his standard. He took meetings in his study from 8 until noon. Lunch was always the same: rice, a small portion of whatever his cook Nora Bey had prepared, a glass of cold water. Afternoons were variable, some days visitors, some days silence, some days he walked the garden alone for an hour, and I left his afternoon tea on the low table by the window and withdrew without a word. I was not his only staff. There was Nora in the kitchen, small, deliberate, with a dry humor she kept mostly to herself. There was his driver Taeyun, a man of around 60 who had been with Seekjin since before I was born and communicated primarily through the angle of his eyebrows. There were security personnel I saw but never spoke to, who moved through the property like weather. And there was, occasionally, Sangchul. I knew from the beginning that Seekjin had a son. I understood the household was wealthy in ways that exceeded any legitimate business I could identify. I understood, gradually, that the men who visited Seekjin's study were not the kind of men who came to discuss investments. Retired in this family meant something different than it meant in the rest of the world. Sangchul visited once or twice a month in those early years. He was in his late 20s, handsome in a cold, assembled way, always in a suit, always with at least one man behind him who stood too still in the way that trained men stand still. He never spoke to me directly. He looked through me the way people look through glass, acknowledging my existence only as a transparent barrier between himself and whatever he actually wanted to see. I noticed it, filed it, did not particularly mind. But Seekjin was different. In the second year, he began asking questions, small ones at first. Had I eaten? Was the schedule manageable? Did I have family in the city? My father, I told him. He drives a taxi. Something moved across Seekjin's face that I couldn't name then. Something brief and private. Is he well? He's fine, I said. He's always fine. He doesn't know how to be anything else. Seekjin looked at me for a long moment. That kind of man is rare, he said. Hold on to him. I did for another year. And then my father was killed in what was described in the police report as a robbery gone wrong. A Tuesday in November. His taxi found 3 blocks from a destination he'd never reached. Nothing taken. No suspects. I came to work the next morning because I didn't know what else to do. Seekjin looked at me when I brought his tea and knew immediately that something was wrong. Not because I showed it. Because he was the kind of man who noticed what was not shown. Sit down, Jessica, he said. I sat. I told him. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, very quietly, I am sorry. Not I'm sorry for your loss. Not the formulas. Just, I am sorry. As though he were accepting something. As though the apology belonged to him specifically. I didn't understand that then. I would, eventually. But 11 years is a long time, and the understanding came slowly, the way the most important things always do. There is a particular kind of intimacy that grows between people who share space without pretense for long enough. It isn't romance. It isn't friendship, exactly. It is something more like mutual honesty, the kind that develops when two people have watched each other closely enough that performance becomes exhausting and truth becomes simply easier. By year 5, Seekjin had stopped performing for me. He talked about his life with a frankness that occasionally made me set the teapot down carefully to keep my hands from shaking. Not the day-to-day operations, he was too careful for that, and I was too sensible to invite it, but the broader strokes. The weight of decisions made decades ago. The nature of loyalty in a world where loyalty was both the most valuable commodity and the most frequently counterfeit. The particular loneliness of being powerful in a way that prevented genuine closeness. I have spent my entire life surrounded by people who need something from me, he told me once, in our 7th year. You are the only person in this house who doesn't need anything. I need the salary, I said. He almost smiled. You know what I mean. I did. And it was true. I wasn't auditioning for his trust or angling for his favor. I was there because the work was quiet and the wage was fair, and something about the stillness of that house suited the particular hollowness that my father's death had left in me. He started, in year 6, leaving things on the table with my afternoon tea. Books. Articles. Once a photograph, a city street somewhere warm, full of color, that I didn't recognize. My wife's hometown, he said when I asked. Before the marriage. Before everything. He picked it back up and I never saw it again. His wife was Hannah Yoon. She lived in a separate residence across the city, a deliberate arrangement that no one in the household discussed. She visited occasionally. I saw her perhaps a dozen times in 11 years. She was a handsome woman. Small. Precise. With the kind of stillness that, in her, did not feel like peace, but like compression, like something held tightly enough that it would not move. She looked at me the way certain women look at household staff, not unkindly, but through me, as though I were furniture that required maintenance rather than acknowledgement. I did not particularly like Hannah Yoon. I kept that information in the same interior file where I kept most things about that house, private, noted, undisclosed. Until year 9, when I stopped keeping it private. It was an evening in March, during one of Hannah's irregular visits. Seekjin had been unwell for several months, fatigued in a way his doctor couldn't fully account for. I had noticed. Nora had noticed. Taeyeon had noticed. But Seekjin dismissed our concern with the stubbornness of men who have survived worse things than illness and considered declining health a personal insult. That evening I brought his tea to the sitting room where he and Hannah were talking. I knocked. Waited. Entered. The room was partially lit, one lamp in the corner, the rest in shadow, and Hannah was standing by the side table with her back to me. I saw her hand over his cup. I saw what I saw. A small motion. A tipping. Something released. She turned when I entered, and there was a moment, a fraction of a moment, where her eyes found mine and something passed between us that was neither greeting nor acknowledgement. Something colder. A taking of measure. I set down his tray. I withdrew. And then I stood in the corridor outside for 3 full minutes, with my hands pressed flat against the wall, deciding what to do with what I had just seen. I could have been wrong. I told myself this carefully, systematically, the way you build a case for the safer interpretation. Poor light. Unclear angle. Alternative explanations. But I knew what I had seen. I knocked on his sitting room door again 20 minutes later, after Hannah had left. Seekjin looked up. Read my face. In 9 years, he had become very good at reading my face. Sit down, Jessica, he said. I sat. I told him. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, the room was very quiet. How long have you been here? He asked. 9 years. In 9 years, he said carefully, you have never come to me with something that wasn't true. No. He nodded once. Decisive. And then he said something that reframed everything I thought I understood about my time in that house. I know, he said. I've known for 3 months. I've been documenting it. I stared at him. You've been drinking it. Controlled amounts. Nothing fatal yet. His voice was steady. She is being patient. Incremental. The intention is retirement by infirmity, not death. Not yet. A pause. But the intention will change. When she believes she has enough time. The room was very cold. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because I need a witness, he said. And you, Jessica, are the only person in this house I trust absolutely. He looked at me with an expression I had not seen in 9 years of close proximity. Not the controlled authority. Not the careful assessment. Something older. Something that looked almost like guilt. And because, he said, I owe you more than tea. Seek-Jin died on a Wednesday in early winter. Not dramatically. Not at the hands of an enemy. He died in his own bed, in his own house, with the particular quietness of a man who had made his arrangements and was ready. I had brought his morning tea. He was sitting up in bed, which he had not been able to do unassisted for 3 weeks, and he was dressed. Not in pajamas, but in proper clothes, which surprised me, because dressing in the morning had become difficult. You dressed, I said. I felt I should, he said. It's a significant day. I set the tea down. Is it? I believe so. He picked up the cup. I looked at it for a moment. 11 years of excellent tea, Jessica. Something in the way he said made me still. Sit with me, he said. Just for a little while. I sat in the chair beside his bed, the way I had sat in my mother's room in her last weeks, and we drank our tea together, him from his cup and I from the extra one he had somehow anticipated, and he talked. Not about the will or the documents or Sangchul. He talked about his mother's kitchen in Seoul. A river he had walked beside as a boy. The way a city looked from a rooftop he had climbed to once at 17 and never returned to because beauty, he had decided at 17, was something you should not revisit too often. It diminishes. He was very still by the end of the cup. I knew he was gone before I checked. I sat with him for a few minutes anyway. The way I sat with my mother. The way I had not been able to sit with my father. Then I called Taeyun. The days between his death and the will reading were a particular kind of suspension. The house was filled with people I didn't know, lawyers, associates, distant relatives who had not visited while Seek-Jin was living and arrived now with the bright eyes of people calculating inheritance. Sangchul arrived the evening of the first day, swept through the house with Daeho at his heel. Daeho, his enforcer, a man of around 40 with a face built for communicating threat, and did not speak to me except to say, with his eyes on some middle distance above my head, you can stay until after the reading. Then we'll discuss the household's future. He meant my dismissal. It was already decided in his tone. I said nothing. I brought the evening's tea to the sitting room designated for the family's use and withdrew. The night before the reading, I found the envelope exactly where Seek-Jin had told me it would be, inside the lining of the winter coat I wore only to work, stitched into the hem with small, neat stitches that I would have attributed to Nora if Nora had not looked at the coat and frowned as though she'd never touched it. I held the envelope for a long time. It was sealed. Addressed, in Seek-Jin's handwriting, to Sangchul Yoon. But it had been placed in my keeping, which meant the decision of when it was delivered was mine. Only when he threatens you, he had said. Not before. I put the envelope in my bag. I slept badly. I rose at 5, pressed my black dress flat, and went to the will reading. The lawyer's name was Isul Kwan, a small, composed woman of around 50, who had worked with Seek-Jin for 15 years and whose face, as she read, was professional and entirely unreadable. The house went to Jessica Smith. The investment accounts went to Jessica Smith. The private trust, $47 million, went to Jessica Smith, with a single condition: that she occupy the property for no less than 1 year from the date of death. A series of smaller bequests followed. Nora received a generous sum. Taeyeon received the same. Several charitable organizations received endowments. Sang-chul received his father's watch, a photograph, a letter to be delivered through Isul. Nothing else. The room did not explode. It went the kind of still that happens before explosions. Then Sang-chul stood. He was not loud. Sang-chul-yoon, I had learned from 11 years of occasional proximity, was never loud. Loud was for men who needed volume to establish authority. He had never needed it. This will be contested, he said to Isul. His voice was absolute. A household employee does not receive $47 million from a man of my father's standing without undue influence. I want it challenged within the week. He turned to me then. Fully. For the first time in 11 years, he looked at me, not through me, but directly at me, and what I saw in his face was not rage. It was worse than rage. It was the particular coldness of a man making a decision about something he considers already settled. You will vacate the property by the end of month, he said. Whatever he told you, whatever you believe you're entitled to, it ends here. I'd recommend you not make this difficult. He meant it as a final word. I reached into my bag. Your father asked me to give you this, I said. When you threatened me. I held out the envelope. Sang-chul looked at it. At me. At the envelope again. He took it. And some shift, some flicker, crossed his face as he recognized his father's handwriting. So Sang-chul just told Jessica to vacate the house by end of month. 11 years. $47 million. And she pulled out an envelope with his dead father's handwriting on it and went. He said, give this to you when you threatened me. Subscribe and do not move. Because Sang-chul hasn't opened that letter yet. And when a man as controlled as Sang-chul-yoon goes still holding a piece of paper, what comes next is not what any of us are ready for. Jessica knows. She's been ready for 2 years. Sang-chul did not read the letter in the lawyer's office. He looked at the envelope for a long moment, the handwriting, the seal, the particular deliberateness of a man who had once controlled rooms with posture alone and was now controlling a room from beyond it, and then he placed it inside his jacket and left. Daeho followed. The door closed. Isul Kwan, who had maintained her composure throughout the reading with impressive discipline, allowed herself a single slow exhale. He'll be back, she said. Not to me specifically. Just noting a fact. I know, I said. I went back to the house. I walked through the rooms I had kept for 11 years and felt nothing dramatic, no triumph, no grief, just the strange weightlessness of a person whose purpose has shifted without announcement. Nora was in the kitchen. She had been crying, which she would vigorously deny if asked, and was addressing her feelings through the production of an unnecessary quantity of rice. You should eat, she said. I know. He loved you, you know, she said, eyes on the pot. Not in a way that needed a name. The old way. The way men of his generation protected people without being able to say the word directly. I sat down at the kitchen table. Ate some rice. Waited. Sang-chul came back at 9 o'clock that evening. He came alone. No Daeho. No associates. He rang the front door bell the way a person rings a bell when they are not certain they have the right to walk in anymore and are too proud to acknowledge the uncertainty. I opened the door. He looked different. Not softened, that would never be the right word for Sang-chul-yoon. But something had shifted in the architecture of his expression. Something had moved. May I come in? He asked. In 11 years, he had never asked. I stepped aside. He walked to the sitting room, his father's sitting room, and stood in it the way people stand in spaces that have recently been vacated by someone enormous. Taking up the absence. I sat in the chair I had always sat in. He remained standing. How much of this did you know? He asked. What's in the letter? How much did you know before tonight? I measured my answer. Most of it. For the last 2 years. Something passed through him. He told you. Gradually. In this way, he told people things carefully, only what was necessary, only when he trusted completely. I want you to read it, he said. He passed me the letter. I want to know if what it says matches what he told you. I unfolded it. Seekjean's handwriting was meticulous. He had written in English for my benefit, I realized. So I would be able to verify. The letter began. Sangchul, if Jessica has given you this, it is because you have threatened her. I am disappointed but not surprised. You have your mother's instinct for protecting territory. What I need you to understand, before anything else, is this. Jessica Smith is not an interloper. She is not a manipulation or a scheme. She is the only person in my household who has been honest with me for 11 years. The only person who, when she saw something that cost her something to see, told me the truth anyway. 2 years ago, your mother began poisoning me. The room was absolutely still. Not to kill me. Not initially. To diminish me, to create a decline that would accelerate my retirement and transfer operational authority to you more completely. I believe she intended the final step when I was sufficiently weakened. I have documentation of this. Medical records. Chemical analyses. A record of every visit and the timeline of my symptoms. I did not confront her. I want you to understand why. Because confronting her would have required confronting you, would have forced you to choose between your mother and your father. I loved you too much to put that on you while I was still breathing. So I documented. I withdrew. I made my arrangements. And I protected the only person who protected me. Jessica came to me the night she saw your mother. She did not have to. She risked the only stable thing she had in the world to tell me the truth. That is the rarest thing I have encountered in 50 years of operating in a world built on loyalty that is bought rather than given. She is in this house because she earned it. Because I could not give her back what my world took from her, and I will come to that, but I could give her safety. Stability. Something that cannot be taken without a fight she is now equipped to win. There is more you need to know. About Jessica's father. About what happened to him. About my knowledge of it and my failure to act. I am sorry, Sangchul. For more than you know yet. I stopped reading. The room was very quiet. Sangchul had not moved. His hands were very still in the way of a man who has learned to keep them still when everything else in him wants to move. Her father, he said. His voice was barely above room temperature. Yes, I said. He knew about her father. Yes. What happened to her father? I looked at him steadily. Your enforcer killed him, I said. 11 years ago. On your mother's order. Because my father saw something he wasn't supposed to see. And your father hired me the next year because he found out and couldn't undo it. He could only try to make it right. Sangchul sat down. Slowly. In his father's chair. And for the first time in my life, I saw Sangchul look like something other than the most controlled man in any room. He didn't speak for a long time. I sat across from him with the letter in my hands, and I watched him process the unprocessable, and I thought about what it costs to receive information like this, not just about a parent, but about the architecture of your own life. Every assumption you had made about the foundations of your world, quietly rearranged without your knowledge by the people who built them. I had had 2 years to prepare for this conversation. He had had 2 hours. Finally, he said, did Daeho know who she was? When he killed her father? No. He was given a name and a location. He didn't know the connection to me. I wasn't working for your father yet. But my mother knew. Your father believed so. I paused. He wasn't certain whether she ordered it specifically to eliminate a witness or whether it was coincidence that her chosen household staff turned out to be the daughter of the man she'd already had removed. He thought the first option more likely. Your mother is precise. Sangchul was quiet again. I had the impression of a mind moving very fast behind very still eyes. Why didn't he tell me? He said. He had 2 years. He could have. He was protecting you, I said. The same reason he didn't confront your mother directly. He said putting it on you while he was alive would have forced you to act before you were ready. Before you had all the information. He thought I would protect her. He thought you might. Out of loyalty. Before you understood the full picture. He was right, Sangchul said. Flat. Honest. The admission of a man who knows himself. If he'd come to me 2 years ago, I would have found a way to doubt it. He stopped. I know, I said. He looked at me sharply. Don't do that. Do what? Sympathize with me. You're the one who lost someone. That was 11 years ago, I said. I've had time. You're processing in real time. I can hold both things at once. He looked at me the way people look at things they don't have a category for. He said, What do you want? I want the house, I said. Because he left it to me and because it's the only place in this city where I have been warm for 11 years and I am not ready to leave it. He waited. I want Daeho to answer for what he did. Not to me. I'm not asking you to deliver him to me. To the police. Properly. With the documentation your father kept. Sangchul's expression moved. That will create complications. I imagine it will. He has been with me for 15 years. I imagine he has, I said. That's between you and the consequences of what your mother built. I'm not asking you to dismantle your organization. I'm asking you to answer for one specific death. A long silence. And my mother, he asked. That, I said carefully, is yours. Your father documented everything. It's in a location his lawyer has access to. What happens with it is your decision. He stood. Walked to the window. The garden was dark outside, Seek-jin's garden, the one he had walked in on quiet afternoons while I left his tea on the table by the glass. He loved this garden, Sangchul said. Not to me. To the window. He did. I was here once when I was 12. He showed me every plant by name. In Korean and in Latin. A pause. I don't remember any of them. He had favorites, I said. He always stopped at the magnolia by the east wall. Why? He said it was the only thing in his garden that bloomed without being asked. A beet. I always thought he meant it as a compliment to someone. Something shifted in Sangchul's face. Something that took effort to maintain as neutral. He picked up the letter. Read it again. All of it. Stood for a moment in the room that still smelled faintly of Seek-jin's particular tea. Give me a week, he said. For what? To handle Daeho. Through the proper channels, the way you asked. He folded the letter. The house has built-in protection. I understand that now. The condition of occupancy, the lawyer's standing instructions. If anything happens to you within the year, the documentation goes to every rival family and every relevant law enforcement body simultaneously. He had 2 years to prepare, I said. And 11 years before that of watching how things work. He paused at the door. I was wrong to threaten you, he said. In the lawyer's office. It was the second time in one evening that he had said something I hadn't prepared for. Yes, I said. You were. He left. I sat in the sitting room for a long time after the door closed, in the house that was mine now, listening to the particular quiet that a room keeps when it has held too much history for a single evening. 3 days after Sangchul's visit, a second letter arrived. This one was from Isolkwan. Brief and businesslike, requesting a meeting at my earliest convenience regarding supplementary documentation attached to the estate. I went the following morning. Isol's office was quiet. She made tea without being asked, which I noted and appreciated. She set a folder on the table between us with the careful deliberateness of someone who has been holding information and is ready, with some relief, to release it. Mr. Yoon left additional instructions, she said, to be disclosed after the will reading, contingent on your continued occupancy of the property. What kind of instructions? Isul folded her hands. There is no clean way to present this. I'll simply tell you what the documents say and allow you to take whatever time you need. All right. Jessica. 11 years ago, Seek-jin Yoon hired you through the agency because of your name. Not because you were the most qualified candidate. Because your last name is Smith and your mother's name was Adiz Obi Smith, and Adiz Obi Smith was a woman Seek-jin knew 35 years ago. I was very still. He knew my mother? He knew her well. Isul was careful. In the year before his arranged marriage to Hannah, Sikjin was in Lagos on extended business. He was 25. Your mother was 22. He described it in his documentation as the most significant relationship of his life before the obligations of his family's expectations required him to return to Seoul. The room was very quiet. He didn't know about you, Isul continued. Not at first. Your mother never contacted him. He said she wouldn't, that she had too much pride and too clear an understanding of what his world was. She protected you from it. She protected me from it, I repeated, hearing it in a new register. He found out about you when you were 17, through a contact who had maintained some loose correspondence with your mother's family. By then your mother was already ill. He was not in a position to make contact without exposing a history that would have created significant danger for you and for your mother. He monitored from a distance. He made anonymous contributions to medical costs. I set my teacup down. Carefully. When your mother died, Isul said, and then your father, the documentation uses the word devastated. He arranged for your name to come to the agency. He arranged for you to be recommended. He wanted you close where he could make sure you were safe. He is my father, I said. Not a question. Biologically, yes. He confirmed it through a test conducted without your knowledge in your 4th year at the house. A cup you'd used. He needed to be certain. I thought about year 4. The year he had started asking me questions. The year the conversation had begun to shift. He had known by then. He had known and had started, in his oblique, careful, thoroughly Sikjin way, trying to know me. The tea, the books, the photograph of a city. The way he looked at me sometimes with that expression I couldn't name. Guilt. It had always been guilt. And something deeper than guilt that I had not had the category for. He couldn't tell me, I said. He was afraid of 2 things, Isul said. That you would leave. And that acknowledging you would expose you to the full weight of what his world was. Hannah's world. The danger that came with his name. She paused. And I believed that he had taken too long, and that the apology was too enormous to deliver directly. I looked out of Isul's window at the city below. A city my mother had never lived in. A city my father had driven through for 23 years, not knowing that the man who had loved the woman who bore him a daughter lived somewhere inside it, watching. Is Sangchul aware of this? I asked. Not yet. Mr. Yun's instruction was that you be told first. The decision of whether and when to tell Sangchul is yours entirely. I absorbed this. What does it mean legally for the will? Nothing changes. The will is valid regardless of the familial relationship. But if the relationship becomes public record, your position becomes considerably more difficult to contest and considerably more dangerous, depending on how Hannah Yun responds. I thought about Hannah Yun. Precise. Compressed. Looking through me for 11 years in a house her husband had filled with the daughter she didn't know he had. If Hannah found out who I was, if she had not already suspected and acted on that suspicion in the form of a series of carefully engineered household accidents and 1 dead taxi driver. Jessica, Isul said carefully. Is it possible that Mrs. Yun already knew? I thought about my father's death. A robbery. No suspects. Nothing taken. A man who'd driven a taxi for 23 years in a city where the woman who'd loved the most feared retired Dawn had raised his unacknowledged daughter. Yes, I said. I think it's possible. Okay, let us just pause. His biological daughter. 11 years of morning tea. Her mother was his great love. And Hannah Yun, precise, compressed Hannah Yun, may have known the entire time and had her father killed anyway. Subscribe right this second, because Sangchul is about to find out he has a half-sister. His mother is considerably more dangerous than even he understood. And Jessica Smith has just gone from the black waitress who inherited everything to the woman who is about to rewrite the entire Yun family tree. We physically cannot leave now. I told Sangchul on a Friday. I called his number. Isul had provided it, businesslike, as though she had expected I would need it, and asked to meet. He arrived that evening with the same punctuality and the same energy, though without Daeho this time. Something had changed in him in the days since the letter. He moved differently. A man reassembling himself. He had taken Daeho to the police. I knew this because Isul had received confirmation from Detective Yun, who had been presented with documentation that made the case straightforward in a way that cases involving men like Daeho rarely are. He had done what he said he would do. I sat him down in the sitting room. I made Seekjin's tea, prepared the way I had prepared it for 11 years. I watched him look at the cup and then at me, and I thought, not for the first time, that there was something in his face when he was in this room that had always been there and that I had spent 11 years failing to name. Something familiar. There is something else, I said. That Seekjin left for me to decide. He set the cup down. I told him. I watched his face as the information arrived. The order Isul had laid it out for me. My mother, Lagos, 35 years ago. The monitoring from a distance. The agency recommendation. The cup in year 4 and the certainty established by a man who needed to know before he could love someone properly. Sangchul was quiet throughout. He had a quality that I was beginning to understand was not coldness, but containment, the management of a large interior life by a person who had been taught very early that showing it was dangerous. When I finished, the sitting room held the kind of silence that requires several minutes to navigate. He never told me, Sangchul said finally. No. He had a daughter. A daughter he was afraid of, I said. Of what his world had already taken from her. Of what acknowledging her would expose her to. I paused. He found his own way to protect me. The way he found his own ways to do most things. Obliquely, Sangchul said. Yes. A silence. Then, you knew my father better than I did. The statement was not self-pity. It was arithmetic. Simple, unwelcome, accurate. I knew a different version of him, I said. The version that wasn't performing for his world. I don't think either of us knew all of him. He looked up. My mother, he said. She may have known. Isul thinks it's possible. If she did. Then your father wasn't incidental, he said. No. The room was very, very quiet. She killed him, Sangchul said, because he was the father of Seekjin's daughter. Because a daughter with a potential claim was a threat she couldn't ignore. He stopped. And then she spent the next decade slowly poisoning the man she'd done it to protect. I had arrived at the same conclusion in Isul's office. Hearing it in Sangchul's voice was different. He was dismantling his mother in real time with the same cold precision he applied to everything else. I did not know if this was courage or armor. I need to speak with her, he said. I know. Alone. Of course. He stood. Then stopped. You said you wanted Daeho held accountable. I've done that. He looked at me directly. What do you want regarding my mother? I want the truth to exist on record, I said. I want my father's death reclassified. I want it documented as what it was. I met his eyes. I don't want her destroyed, Sangchul. Not on my account. But I want the record to be honest. I have been living inside a dishonest record for 11 years. He nodded. And the other thing, I said. He waited. I don't know what to call this. What we are. The terminology for it is strange, and I'm not going to pretend it isn't. He almost smiled. The first time I had ever seen anything close to it on his face. Half-siblings is the conventional term. I know what the term is. I don't know yet what the reality is. Neither do I, he said. But I would like to find out. A pause. If you're willing. I thought about Seekjin walking in his garden. The magnolia that bloomed without being asked. The man who had found a way to love someone without being able to say the word directly. I'm willing, I said. He left to see Hannah. I don't know the exact details of what happened in that meeting. I know it lasted 2 hours. I know that Sangchul called Detective Yun afterward and provided additional documentation regarding my father's death. I know that Hannah Yun retained a lawyer the following day. I know that Sangchul came back to the house 3 days later, quieter than I had ever seen him, and sat in the garden for a long time beside the magnolia. I left his tea on the table by the glass. When he came in, he looked at the cup, then at me. "He taught you that," he said. "Yes. The tea. The tea. And a few other things." He picked up the cup. Saturday. We drank in the particular silence of people who are beginning, carefully, to know each other. The magnolia bloomed the following spring. I was in the garden the morning it opened, not deliberately. I had simply come outside with my tea because the light was good and the house had been full of meetings and lawyers and careful conversations for 3 months, and I needed the specific peace that Sikjin had always found in those walks. I had started taking them without realizing I had started. Some habits are absorbed rather than decided. The magnolia did not announce itself. It simply was white blooms against gray morning sky, the garden's quiet declaration that time had continued without asking anyone's permission. I stood there for a while. Then I went back inside and made a second cup of tea and left it on the table by the glass. Old habits. The 3 months since Sikjin's death had been the most complicated of my life, which is a statement I offer without drama because they had also contained, inside all their complexity, more moments of clarity than the previous 11 years combined. Hannah Yun had not gone quietly. Her lawyers had contested the will on every available basis, and Isul Kwan had countered each challenge with the systematic confidence of a woman who had spent 15 years preparing documents for a man who anticipated opposition. The DNA documentation, the medical records, the timeline of events surrounding my father's death, these had moved the proceedings in directions Hannah's lawyers had not expected. The process was ongoing. It would take time. Sikjin had known it would take time, which is why the occupancy condition had been built in, giving me a foundation that couldn't be removed while the legal machinery moved. I was not afraid of the time. I had learned, in 11 years of that house, that patience is not passive. Patience is its own form of power. Deha's case had moved faster. Detective Yun was thorough and unsentimental, and the documentation was comprehensive. He had been charged not just for my father's death, but for several other matters the investigation surfaced in the course of following the evidence. Sangchul had cooperated fully, at considerable cost to his own operations, and was navigating the consequences with the particular focused competence of a man who has decided which direction he is moving and is moving in it without apology. He came to the house twice a week. We had not yet solved the terminology problem. Half-siblings was accurate, but clinical, and neither of us were clinical people. We were just cautious people pretending to be. We drank tea. We talked. He asked me about Lagos, which I barely remembered but could reconstruct from my mother's stories. I asked him about Seoul, which he described with the particular mix of love and criticism that people reserve for the cities that formed them. He told me about Sikjin when Sikjin was young, the version I didn't have, from the other side of his silence. The father who had been present in ways that were structured and formal and genuinely beloved, who had taught Sangchul chess and then lost to him so rarely that the losses felt like gifts. Who had walked him through the garden at 12 and named every plant. He did that for a reason, I said. What reason? He wanted someone to remember the names. He stopped walking with you when you were older. I thought he missed it. I looked out at the garden. I think he was walking with me instead. Sangchul was quiet. He found his way to the people he loved, I said. It wasn't always direct. It wasn't always in time. But he found his way. Nora was still in the kitchen. She had refused any suggestion of leaving with the dignified finality of a woman who has made a decision and considers the matter closed. Taeyun continued driving for me now, when I needed it, with the same economy of expression and the same communicative eyebrows. The security Sikjin had maintained remained, reconfigured but present, a legacy of the man who had believed that the people he loved required protection whether they asked for it or not. The house had not changed and had changed entirely. It was mine now, not in the way of places we inhabit, but in the way of places that hold the shape of the people who made them, like a coat worn so long it keeps the warmth after you've taken it off. I found the photograph on a Tuesday morning in April, clearing out the study, which I had avoided until then because it was the last room I had not yet moved through properly. It was in the back of the desk drawer, in an envelope worn along the edges from handling. A photograph of a woman I had never seen before but recognized immediately, because she had my mother's laugh lines and my mother's ease, and she was standing on a Lego street that could have been my grandmother's neighborhood. She was young, 21, and she was looking at whoever held the camera with an expression that took my breath slightly. My mother. Before everything. On the back, in Sikh Jean's handwriting, Adis. 1988, the last good year before I went back. I sat at his desk for a long time. Then I took the photograph to the kitchen and showed Nora, who looked at it and then at me with the expression of a person confronting a long-suspected truth. There it is, she said. The tone of someone who has been waiting for the sentence that explains a paragraph they've been rereading for years. There it is, I agreed. Sangchul came that afternoon. I showed him the photograph. He looked at it for a long time. She was beautiful, he said. She was. You have her eyes. My father always said so. A pause. My other father. He looked at me. Something in his face that had been careful for months was slightly less careful today. What do we call this? He asked. I don't know yet, I said. But I think we're figuring it out. He put the photograph on the desk. We drank our tea in the garden, two people made from the same source by different routes, sitting in the garden of a man who had loved obliquely and protected completely and left behind enough truth to rebuild with. If the people he left it to were brave enough to use it. The magnolia held its blooms. The house kept its quiet. And I, Jessica Smith, former waitress, current owner of a house that holds 11 years of tea and a father's guilt and a brother's slow reconstruction, and a story that had taken 35 years to arrive at the morning where it finally, properly, began. I stayed. She stayed. 11 years of tea. One envelope. One letter that dismantled everything. A father she never knew she had, a brother she never expected to find, and a magnolia that blooms in April whether anyone asks it to or not. Subscribe, because the Hannah Yun situation is very much not resolved. The lawyers are still working. The record is still being corrected. And Sangchul has just started learning, at 38 years old, what it means to have a family that actually tells the truth. Part 2 of this story is coming. And it starts with a courtroom and a woman who has been quiet for 11 years and is done with that now. The end. Real talk, and that is where we leave Gisela Moore tonight, standing in a school car park with her son's hand in hers, the man she ran from standing 3 feet away. And the name Enzo Calabretti hanging in the cold night air like a threat that has already been set in motion. 7 years of running. One school gala. One small boy who shook a dangerous man's hand and called him sir. And now the real story, the one Gisela never saw coming, is only just beginning.